I spent 4 years carrying our company without a title, working days and studying nights, convinced my competence would eventually force my family to see me. But on my graduation day, my dad refused my raise. 48 hours later, he hired my sister for 3 times my salary. They assumed I would just grit my teeth and bear it like always. That was the single most expensive mistake they ever made. My name is Zoe Michael. If you looked at the organizational chart of Michael Event Logistics, you would not find my name near the top. You might struggle to find it at all. For a long time, I did not even have a cubicle. My office was the cab of a 3-ton box truck or a folding chair set up behind a stack of shipping pallets in the warehouse. I am 29 years old, but if you saw the way I walk when the rain comes in, or the way I rub my lower back when I think no one is looking, you might mistake me for someone 20 years older. I work for my father, Robert Michael. He is the founder, the CEO, and the face on the billboards that line the interstate highway just outside of town. In those photos, he looks trustworthy. He has a smile that says he can handle anything, silver hair that suggests wisdom, and a handshake that feels like a contract signed in steel. He is a brilliant salesman. He can walk into a boardroom with a client who is furious about a delay, and within 10 minutes, he will have them laughing, pouring scotch, and signing an extension for $50,000 more than the original quote. He sells the dream of seamless execution. He sells the magic. But magic does not move 2,000 heavy oak chairs from a storage unit in New Jersey to a wedding venue in the Hamptons at 4 a.m. Magic does not navigate a 40-foot trailer through a loading dock designed for cargo vans. Magic does not sweat. I do. I started at the company the day after I turned 18. I did not start as an executive assistant or a junior manager. My father told me that if I wanted to be part of the family legacy, I had to understand the grit. At the time, I thought this was a noble lesson in leadership. I thought he was grooming me to be a general who understood the trenches. So, I worked the loading dock. I learned how to drive a forklift before I learned how to negotiate a salary. I took the night shifts that the union guys refused to take. I learned the specific, acrid smell of burning clutch fluid and the taste of stale coffee from a thermos at 3 a.m. My mother, Linda, viewed my position differently. To her, Michael Event. Logistics was not just a business. It was the glue holding our image together. She did not know the difference between a bill of lading and a packing slip, and she did not want to know. Her role was to maintain the domestic front and ensure we looked like the perfect American success story at Sunday brunch. Whenever I came home with grease under my fingernails or bruises on my shins from bumping into crate corners, she would sigh, touch my cheek with her manicured hand, and say the phrase that became the soundtrack of my 20s. Zoe, you know family is everything. We all do our part. Doing my part meant being the invisible engine. It meant fixing the mistakes my father made when he promised clients the impossible. Robert would promise a client that we could transport a delicate, glass art installation across 3 states in 12 hours during a blizzard. He would shake hands, beam at them, and then call me. He would not ask if it was possible. He would just say it had to be done, and I would do it. I would route the drivers, bribe the mechanics to prioritize our trucks, and sometimes drive the lead vehicle myself, white-knuckling the steering wheel while snow blinded the windshield, terrified that one slip would shatter the company's reputation. When the job was done and the art installation arrived intact, the client would praise Robert. They would call him a miracle worker. He would accept the praise with a humble nod, acting as if he had personally carried the glass on his back. I would be standing in the shadows of the loading bay, shivering, holding a clipboard, invisible. Then there was my sister, Haley. Haley is 3 years younger than me. If I am the foundation of the house, buried in the dirt and holding up the weight, Haley is the chandelier in the foyer. She is beautiful, charismatic, and effortlessly bright. She has the same silver tongue as our father but lacks the callousness. She just has a profound, insulated ignorance of how the world actually works. Haley did not work the loading docks. She went to a liberal arts college paid for by the profits I helped generate, and when she graduated, She drifted into the company orbit without a defined role. She would show up at the office at 10 in the morning with an iced coffee, chatter with the receptionists, and talk about brand synergy or vibe curation. The staff loved her because she was nice, and because she never asked them to do anything difficult. She was the golden child. My parents looked at her and saw a reflection of the life they wanted to project. Shiny, happy, and untouched by labor. They looked at me and saw the labor itself. I remember a specific Tuesday last November. It was the height of our busy season. We had 3 massive corporate conferences happening simultaneously in 3 different cities. The logistics board looked like a map of a war zone. One of our key drivers had quit without notice, leaving a truck full of audio-visual equipment stranded 2 hours away from the venue. The client was screaming. It was a disaster that could have cost us a 6-figure contract. My father was at a golf tournament. My mother was hosting a garden club luncheon. Haley was getting her hair highlighted. I was the one who drove out to the stranded truck. I was the one who spent 4 hours in the freezing rain, transferring heavy speaker cabinets from the dead truck to a rental van I had managed to secure with a personal credit card, because the company account was temporarily frozen due to an accounting oversight my father had ignored. I moved 42 heavy cases by myself because the temp agency could not send help in time. My back screamed in protest. I tore the sleeve of my jacket. I broke a nail so far down the bed it bled into my glove. I got the equipment to the venue 45 minutes before the doors opened. I supervised the setup, soaking wet, shivering, directing the stagehands with a voice that was cracking from exhaustion. When the lights went on and the sound check cleared, the client finally calmed down. That evening, I dragged myself back to the office, utterly depleted. My father had just returned from his golf game. He was wearing a crisp polo shirt and looking tan and relaxed. Haley was there, too, showing him photos of a new logo concept she had sketched on a napkin. Robert looked up as I walked in. I looked like a wreck. Mud on my boots, hair plastered to my skull, eyes red-rimmed. "Oh, good. You are back," he said, barely glancing at me. The client called, said everything sounded great. Good work handling that little hiccup. Zoe. A little hiccup. I had just saved $100,000 of revenue and prevented a lawsuit. Haley looked at my muddy boots and wrinkled her nose. Zoe, you really should keep a spare change of clothes in your car. It is not a good look if a client sees you like that. It reflects poorly on the brand. My mother, who had swung by to pick them up for dinner, chimed in, Haley is right. Sweetheart, you represent the Michael name. You need to take more pride in your appearance. I stood there, holding my car keys, feeling the adrenaline crash into a wall of fatigue. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that the Michael name was currently being held up by my spine and my sweat. I wanted to tell them that while Haley was worrying about the brand aesthetic, I was making sure the brand did not go bankrupt. But I did not scream. I swallowed the rage, just like I always did, because I was the responsible one. I was the one who could take it. I told myself that this was just part of the process. I told myself that they were hard on me because they expected more from me. I convinced myself that my father was testing me, pushing me to my limits so that when he finally handed me the keys to the kingdom, he would know I was worthy. I had convinced myself that meritocracy was real. I believed that if you dug the ditches, you eventually got to design the castle. I thought that my sacrifice was a deposit in a bank account that would eventually pay out with interest. Go home and get some rest, Zoe, my father said. Turning back to Haley's sketch, we have a big day tomorrow. I need you to go over the inventory for the tech summit. I drove home in silence. My apartment was dark and cold because I had forgotten to pay the heating bill. Not due to lack of money, but due to lack of time to open my own mail. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall. My body ached with a dull, throbbing rhythm. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from one of the warehouse managers asking about a shift change for the next morning at 6. I picked up the phone and replied. I always replied. I realized then, with a heavy sinking feeling in my gut, that I was not building a legacy. I was just digging a hole. And the deeper I dug, the more dirt they threw on top of me, and the more they expected me to thank them for the exercise. I was the daughter who could be relied upon, which is just a polite way of saying I was the daughter who could be used. I lay down without showering, too tired to wash the day off my skin. I closed my eyes and saw the inventory list scrolling behind my eyelids. I told myself one more lie before I fell asleep. When I finish my master's degree, everything will change. When I have that piece of paper that says I am a master of business administration, they will have to see me. They will have to respect me. But deep down, beneath the exhaustion and the hope, a quieter voice was beginning to speak. It whispered that respect is not something you can earn from people who profit from your submission. It whispered that for the Michael family, my value was not in who I was, but in how much pain I could absorb without making a sound. And I was very, very tired of being silent. To understand why the betrayal cut so deep, you have to understand exactly what I built. You have to see the mess before you can appreciate the cleanup. When I first started taking on actual responsibilities at Michael Event Logistics, the company was not really a business. It was a series of expensive accidents held together by my father's charisma. We were bleeding money in ways that nobody bothered to track. In those early days, the warehouse operated on an oral tradition. We had a foreman named Miller who had been with my father since the 80s. Miller did not believe in computers. He believed in his gut and a grease-stained notebook he kept in his back pocket. If you wanted to know where the 12-channel audio mixer was, you asked Miller. If Miller was out sick, or if Miller simply forgot, the mixer did not exist. We were losing tens of thousands of dollars a year in lost equipment. Microphones would walk off job sites. Expensive lighting rigs would be left in the rain because no one had a checklist to verify they were back on the truck. We paid late fees on rental vehicles we forgot to return. We paid contract penalties because our crews would show up to a wedding in downtown Chicago with the wrong color chairs, necessitating a panic-induced sprint to a local competitor to sub-rent the right ones at a premium price. My father called these incidents the cost of doing business. He laughed them off over drinks, framing them as war stories. I saw them for what they were: rot. I did not ask for permission to fix it. I just started doing it. I knew that if I asked Robert for a budget to modernize, he would give me a lecture on how he built this empire with a handshake and a smile. So, I worked with what I had. I started with the inventory. I spent 3 months of nights and weekends alone in the warehouse, physically touching every single cable, speaker, truss, and fork. I created a digital database from scratch. I printed barcodes on my home printer and taped them to over 5,000 individual items. I taught the crew, grown men who had been doing this for 20 years and resented taking orders from the boss's daughter, how to scan items in and out. It was a war of attrition. They fought me on every scan. They told me it slowed them down. But 3 weeks after I forced the system into place, the system flagged a missing amplifier worth $4,000 before the truck even left the venue. We found it in the trunk of a temporary staffer's car. After that, the crew stopped complaining. They realized the system protected them, too. Once I had control of the physical assets, I moved to the logistics. The routing was a nightmare of inefficiency. We were sending trucks from the north warehouse to jobs in the south, crossing paths with trucks doing the exact opposite. We were burning fuel and billable hours just sitting in traffic. I sat down with a map and 3 years of job data. I built a zoning model. I restructured the dispatch protocol so that crews and equipment were deployed based on proximity and skill set. Not just whoever happened to be standing around the coffee pot when the phone rang. I analyzed the crew rosters. I realized we were sending our heavy-lifting guys to do delicate audio tuning, and our tech-savvy guys to haul lumber. It was a waste of talent. I created profiles for every employee, tracking their certifications, their strengths, and their preferred zones. I stopped relying on memory and started relying on data. When a job order came in for a high-end corporate gala requiring complex lighting but minimal heavy rigging, the software I configured knew exactly who to assign. The chaos began to recede. The frantic phone calls at 2 a.m. became rare. The panic attacks in the loading dock were replaced by the rhythmic beep of scanners and the hum of trucks leaving on time. Then I tackled the safety protocols. Our insurance premiums were astronomical because our accident rate was double the industry average. We had back injuries, dropped loads, and vehicle scrapes constantly. I wrote a 40-page safety manual. I instituted mandatory pre-shift vehicle inspections. I created a checklist for loading and unloading that required a physical signature. It was boring, unglamorous work. It was the kind of work that does not win awards or get applause at the company holiday party, but the results were mathematical and undeniable. In the first full year after I implemented the new operating standards, our lost equipment costs dropped by 90%. Our fuel efficiency increased by 15%. Our insurance premiums were slashed by 20% because we went 12 months without a reportable claim. The company became a machine. It was sleek, reliable, and profitable. The stability meant we could take on more work without breaking. We grew. The revenue line on the quarterly graphs pointed upward at a sharp, aggressive angle. For a while, I felt a quiet, swelling pride. I walked through the warehouse and heard the hum of a system that came from my own brain. I watched the trucks roll out in perfect synchronization and felt like a conductor leading an orchestra. I thought this was it. I thought I had proven myself beyond a shadow of a doubt. But then came the annual review. I walked into my father's office with a binder full of charts. I had visualized the data. I had highlighted the savings in green ink. I showed him exactly how my interventions had added nearly $200,000 to the bottom line in pure savings, not counting the increased revenue capacity. Robert flipped through the binder casually, barely looking at the numbers. He looked tired, but happy. He had just bought a new boat. "This is good stuff, Zoe," he said, closing the binder after less than a minute. "The numbers look healthy. We are having a great year." I waited for him to say, "And you did this." I waited for him to say, "We need to change your title to Director of Operations." I waited for him to discuss my salary, which was currently hovering just slightly above what we paid the senior truck drivers. Instead, he leaned back and smiled. "I tell you, honey, the market is finally respecting the brand. I have been working those phones nonstop. People trust the Michael name. They know when they hire us. They are getting the best." He was attributing the operational efficiency to his sales pitch. He truly believed that the reason we were not losing money on lost gear was because the clients liked him more, not because I had spent 600 hours coding a database. I tried to interject. "Dad, the savings here come from the new inventory controls and the routing software. The insurance drop is because of the safety compliance I enforced." He waved his hand dismissively. Sure. The details matter. I know. You are great at the details. Zoe, you are a real worker bee, just like your grandfather. But never forget, nothing moves until someone sells it. I am out there bringing the rain. You are just holding the bucket." He gave me a 3% cost of living adjustment. 3%. I walked out of his office feeling a strange numbness. It was not just the money, it was the erasure. I had rebuilt the engine of the car while it was moving down the highway, and he was convinced the car was going faster because he had polished the hood ornament. A few weeks later, we had a site visit from a massive potential client, a national pharmaceutical chain looking for a logistics partner for their expo tour. This was the big leagues. I had prepared the presentation on our capabilities. I stood in the back of the conference room while Robert and Haley charmed the executives. Haley was wearing a suit that cost more than my monthly rent, nodding enthusiastically whenever buzzwords like synergy or throughput were mentioned. The client's operations director, a sharp woman named Mrs. Vance, asked a specific question. "How do you handle redundancy if a truck breaks down in a remote sector?" Robert opened his mouth to give a vague, salesy answer about our commitment to excellence. I stepped forward. I could not help it. We utilize a dynamic routing algorithm that maintains a rolling backup fleet within a 200-mile radius of any active convoy. I said, my voice was steady, "We also have standing reciprocation agreements with regional carriers that allow us to subcontract replacement vehicles within 90 minutes. I can show you the response time data from the last 2 quarters if you like." Mrs. Vance looked at me, really looked at me, For the first time, she nodded, impressed. That is exactly what I needed to hear. That is a robust system. Robert laughed, a loud booming sound that filled the room. He walked over and wrapped an arm around my shoulder. Squeezing tight. That is my Zoe. He beamed at the clients. She keeps the computers humming for us. I tell her all the time, just make sure the trucks run on time, and I will handle the rest. We like to keep things tight in the family. He reduced my architectural design of a logistics network to keeping the computers humming. He reduced me to a tech support assistant. The clients smiled politely. They bought it. They bought the image of the benevolent patriarch and his helpful daughter. They signed the contract 2 days later. When the signed contract came in, Robert took the entire office out for a celebratory lunch at a steakhouse. He toasted Haley for designing the pitch deck. He toasted the sales team. He toasted himself for closing the deal. I sat at the end of the table, sipping iced tea. I looked around at the people eating steaks paid for by the efficiency I had created. I looked at Haley, laughing and taking a selfie with the champagne bottle. I looked at my father, basking in the glow of his own perceived genius. I realized then that I was not just being undervalued. I was being consumed. My competence was the fuel they burned to keep their lights bright. As long as I stayed in the dark, fixing the cracks and bolstering the foundation, they could pretend the castle stood tall because of their magic. They did not want me to lead. They did not even want me to succeed. They wanted me to function. They wanted me to be a utility, reliable and silent, like the electricity in the walls. You only notice the electricity when it stops working. And as I watched them cheer, a cold, hard thought settled in my chest. If they refused to see the system I built, perhaps they would only appreciate it when I took it with me. But I was not ready to leave yet. I still had one more desperate hope, one more attempt to force them to see me. I would get the credentials they could not ignore. I would make myself undeniable, or so I thought. The cost of being the person who always says, I can handle it, is that eventually, people stop asking if you are okay. They stop wondering if the load is too heavy because you have never dropped it. They just pile more on, assuming your spine is made of steel rather than bone and nerve. For the last 2 years, I lived in a state of perpetual, vibrating anxiety. My life outside of Michael Event Logistics ceased to exist. It did not end with a bang or a dramatic breakup. It just slowly eroded, like a shoreline being eaten away by a relentless tide. I stopped making plans. It was easier than canceling them. I remember the night of my best friend Sarah's 30th birthday. I had bought a dress. I had reserved the evening off on the calendar 3 weeks in advance. I was actually looking forward to feeling like a young woman instead of a logistics machine. But at 5 p.m, a refrigerated truck carrying catering supplies for a massive charity gala broke down on the interstate. The driver was panicking. The food was spoiling. Robert was at a wine tasting. Haley was at a spin class. I did not go to the birthday party. I spent my evening on the side of a highway in New Jersey, coordinating a cargo transfer between 2 trucks while trucks thundered past me at 70 miles per hour, shaking the ground beneath my feet. By the time I got home, it was 1 a.m. I sent Sarah a text apologizing. She replied with a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. She stopped inviting me to things after that. I could not blame her. Who wants a friend who is married to a forklift? My phone became a physical extension of my hand. It was a leash, and the company held the handle. It did not matter where I was. I could be in the shower, in the dentist's chair, or trying to sleep. If that screen lit up, my heart rate spiked. I developed a phantom vibration syndrome where I would feel the phone buzzing against my thigh even when it was across the room. Family dinners were the worst. We would sit down at the dining room table, a spread of roast chicken and vegetables that my mother had prepared. To an outsider, it looked idyllic, but under the table, my phone was always in my lap. Robert would be telling a story about a client he charmed on the golf course. Haley would be talking about a new influencer she was following, and I would be silently texting a warehouse manager in Ohio, negotiating overtime pay to get a shipment out. Pass the potatoes, Zoe, my mother would say. I would hand her the bowl with one hand while typing with the other. "Are you listening, Zoe?" my father would ask, annoyed that my eyes were down. "I am listening. Dad," I would say, "I am just making sure the Denver shipment clears customs." "Put the phone away," he would snap. "We are eating." If I put the phone away, the shipment sits at the border for 3 days and we lose the contract. I wanted to scream, but I never did. I just placed the phone face down on the table, watching the notification light blink, a tiny pulse of panic that ruined my appetite. My body began to rebel. It started with the sleep. I would wake up at 3 in the morning, mind racing, thinking about bills of lading and driver schedules. Then came the stomach pains, a sharp, gnawing burn right below my ribs. I started eating antacids like they were candy. I kept a bottle of them in my car, in my desk, in my purse. I looked in the mirror one morning and saw gray circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. I looked hollowed out. I mentioned it to my mother once, just once. I was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, waiting for the coffee to brew, rubbing my stomach. "Mom, I think I need to see a doctor," I said. "My stomach has been killing me for weeks, and I'm just so tired. I feel like I'm going to snap." Linda Michael did not turn away from the stove where she was making an egg white omelet for Haley. She just sighed, that soft, martyr-like sigh she had perfected. "Oh, honey, we are all tired," she said. "Your father is under so much pressure with the expansion. He barely sleeps." I stared at her back. "Dad plays golf twice a week," I said. "He takes naps in his office. He is carrying the weight of the world." "Zoe," she said, turning to look at me with a sad smile. "And we need you to be strong. You are the rock. Haley is, well, you know Haley is sensitive. She cannot handle the stress like you can. You have always been the tough one. It is your gift." My gift was the ability to suffer in silence so that they did not have to be inconvenienced. She framed my exploitation as a virtue. She made it sound like my ulcers were a badge of honor. By calling me the rock, she ensured that I could never crumble, because if I did, I would be the one letting the family down. That conversation was a turning point. I realized they did not see me as a daughter, or even as a human being with needs and limits. I was a resource. I was a generator they kept in the basement, humming along, burning fuel, destined to run until the gears stripped or the engine seized. I knew I needed a way out, but I also knew I could not just leave with nothing. I needed leverage. I needed something that proved, on paper, that I was not just Robert Michael's helper. I needed the world to certify my competence. I decided to go back to school. I applied to a Master of Science in Operations Management program at a university in the city. It was a rigorous program, designed for professionals, with classes held at night. When I told my father, he laughed. "More school?" he asked. "What for?" "You are learning everything you need to know right here in the real world. A professor who has never driven a truck cannot teach you anything about logistics." "I am doing it for me." "Dad," I said. "As long as it does not interfere with your work," he said, shrugging. "You are paying for it yourself, right?" I paid every cent. Tuition, books, fees. I took out a small loan because I refused to ask them for a dime. For 2 years, my life became a blur of exhaustion that I still do not know how I survived. I would wake up at 5:30, be at the warehouse by 6:30 to supervise the morning loadout. I worked a full 10-hour day, dealing with drivers, clients, and my father's chaotic demands. Then, at 5 o'clock, while the rest of the office was packing up, I would drive an hour into the city, fighting rush hour traffic, eating a granola bar for dinner. Classes ran from 6:30 to 9:30. I sat in lecture halls, fighting to keep my eyes open, listening to professors talk about supply chain theory, lean management, and statistical quality control. The irony was that everything they taught, I was already doing, but the classes gave me the vocabulary. They gave me the frameworks. I realized that what I had built at Michael Event Logistics wasn't just common sense. It was a sophisticated application of just-in-time inventory management. I wasn't just organized, I was an operations architect. I would get home at 11 at night, open my laptop, and write papers until 2 in the morning. And here's the sickest part. I used the company as my laboratory. When I had a project on process optimization, I used our warehouse data. I analyzed our fuel consumption for a statistics class and found a way to route our trucks that saved us another 12% on diesel. I implemented a new vendor management system for a final project that streamlined our sub-rentals. Even while I was trying to build my escape hatch, I was still adding value to their house. I was fixing their problems to get my grade. The company got better. The margins got fatter. My father bought a new luxury sedan. Haley went on a 3-week trip to Europe to find herself. I stayed behind. I worked. I studied. I barely slept. There were moments when I wanted to quit the program. One night, I was sitting on my floor, surrounded by textbooks, crying because I was so tired, my hands were shaking and I could not type. My phone rang. It was a driver who had gotten lost in downtown Boston. I answered the phone. I guided him in. Then I wiped my face and finished the paper. I finished the degree in 2 years flat. I graduated with a 4.0 grade point average, top of my class. The graduation ceremony was on a Saturday in May. I had asked for the day off 3 months in advance. My parents came. They had to. It would have looked bad if they didn't. Robert wore a suit and checked his watch constantly. Linda smiled and waved, but she kept asking why the ceremony was taking so long. Haley did not come. She had a brunch with her sorority sisters that she just couldn't get out of. I sat in the sea of graduates, wearing the cap and gown. When they called my name, Zoe Michael, Master of Science in Operations Management, summa cum laude, I walked across the stage. I felt a flicker of pride. For a moment, just a fleeting second, I felt powerful. I had done this. No one had given it to me. I had carved this achievement out of stone with my own 2 hands. I looked down at the audience. My father was looking at his phone. I walked back to my seat, clutching the diploma cover. The girl next to me, a stranger, high-fived me. "You look like you need a drink," she whispered. I smiled at her. "You have no idea," I said. After the ceremony, we stood outside in the bright spring sunshine. I was holding my diploma. My mother hugged me, careful not to wrinkle her silk blouse. "That was nice, dear," she said. "But my goodness, it was long." "Congratulations, kid," my father said. He clapped me on the shoulder. "Now that this little school project is over, maybe you can focus a bit more. We have been slipping on the afternoon dispatch numbers lately." He did not ask to see the diploma. He did not ask what I had learned. He did not ask how it felt to be done. My phone buzzed in the pocket of my graduation gown underneath the heavy fabric. I pulled it out. It was a text from the office manager. "Robert is not answering. Client for the Monday Expo is freaking out about the load-in time. Call them ASAP." I looked at the phone. I looked at my father, who was already walking toward the parking lot, talking to my mother about where they should go for dinner. "Somewhere quick," he said, because he had an early tea time the next day. I stood there in my cap and gown, surrounded by happy families celebrating their children. I felt the weight of the diploma in one hand and the weight of the phone in the other. I realized then that the degree changed nothing for them. To them, it was just a hobby I had finished, a distraction that was finally over so I could get back to my real purpose, serving them. But it changed something for me. I looked at the screen. I did not call the client back immediately. For the first time in 4 years, I let it wait. "I'll call them in an hour," I whispered to myself. I took a deep breath. I had the paper, I had the knowledge, and most importantly, I now had the absolute, terrifying certainty that if I stayed, I would die a slow death of resentment. I got in the car with my parents. I answered the client's call on the way to the restaurant. I fixed the problem in 10 minutes. My father nodded at me in the rearview mirror, satisfied. "Good girl," he said. He did not know it, but he was talking to a ghost. The Zoe he thought he owned was already gone. She had been replaced by someone who knew exactly what she was worth and exactly how much she was being robbed, and she was just waiting for the right moment to present the bill. I chose a Tuesday morning to kill the hope I had been nurturing for 10 years. Tuesday is historically the quietest day in logistics. The weekend rushes are cleared. The mid-week crisis has not yet hit, and the drivers are settled into their long-haul routes. If you are going to drop a bomb, you do it when the air is still. I did not walk into my father's office as his daughter. I walked in as a master of science in operations management with 4 years of documented performance data. I had spent the entire weekend compiling a 30-page dossier. It was bound in a navy blue cover, the plastic sheet over the front crisp and unblemished. Inside, I had laid out everything. I had 3 sections. The first was a retrospective analysis of cost savings generated by my direct interventions, the fuel reduction, the inventory loss elimination, the insurance premiums. I had calculated the total saved to be just over $240,000 annually. The second section was a market analysis. I had pulled salary data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and 3 private industry reports for the position of Director of Operations in the tri-state area. The median base salary was $130,000 a year, plus performance bonuses and equity options. My current salary was $42,000. The third section was my proposal. I was not asking for the full market rate. I was asking for $85,000. It was a 40% discount on my market value. A family discount, if you wanted to call it that. I thought it was incredibly generous. I thought it was a deal no rational businessman could refuse. Robert was sitting behind his mahogany desk, reading a golf magazine. He did not look up when I knocked on the open door frame. "Do you have a minute, Robert?" I asked. I did not call him Dad. I wanted to set the tone. This was business. He flipped a page. "Sure. What is burning down? Did the Chicago truck blow a tire?" "Nothing is burning down," I said, stepping inside and closing the door behind me. That is actually what I want to talk about. The fact that nothing is burning down. I sat in the leather chair across from him. It was lower than his desk chair, designed to make whoever sat in it look up at him. I placed the blue binder on the desk. I slid it across the mahogany until it rested right on top of his magazine. He looked at the binder, then at me, with a look of mild amusement. "What is this? A book report?" "It is a compensation review," I said, keeping my voice even and low. "I have been with the company for 4 years full-time. I have completed my master's degree. I have restructured the entire operational workflow. The company is more profitable now than it has ever been, and a significant portion of that margin comes from the efficiencies I implemented." Robert sighed. He took his reading glasses off and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He did not open the binder. He did not even touch it. "Zoe," he said, his voice taking on that familiar, patronizing tone he used when explaining why we could not buy new tires for the fleet. "We are having a good year, sure, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. The economy is fickle." "I have the numbers right here," I said, tapping the cover. "I have saved us nearly $250,000 a year. That is net profit. Robert, I am asking for a salary adjustment to $85,000. That is still $45,000 below the market average for my role." He laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a laugh. 85,000? Jesus. "Zoe, do you think I am printing money back here?" "I am not asking for a favor." I said, "I am asking for fair market value. Actually, I am asking for significantly less than that. If you hired someone off the street to do what I do, manage the fleet, handle compliance, run the inventory database, you would have to pay them 6 figures. You know that." He leaned back in his chair, lacing his fingers behind his head. The amusement was gone, replaced by a cold hardness. "Here is the thing you are missing," he said. "Someone off the street does not get the privileges you get. Someone off the street does not get to learn the business from the ground up in a safe environment. You are here because I allow you to be here. You have a job because I created one for you. You are lucky to have a paycheck at all in this economy." My stomach tightened, but I did not flinch. I do not have this job because of charity. I have this job because I am good at it. I work 60 hours a week. I am on call 24 hours a day. He waved a hand dismissively. That is what it takes. That is the family business. We all sacrifice. Your mother sacrifices. I sacrifice. You think I want to be here dealing with unions and insurance agents? We do it for the legacy. You are paying Haley's credit card bills out of the company account. I said. It was a low blow. Perhaps. But it was a fact. I had seen the ledgers, and she does not work here. That is different, he snapped. Haley is finding her path. You found yours. Do not be petty. Zoe, it does not become you. He finally reached out and tapped the binder. And as for this degree of yours, look, I am proud you finished your school. Good for you. But do not pretend I asked you to do that. That was your choice. You wanted to go sit in a classroom and read books. That is a hobby. Zoe, it has nothing to do with moving crates on a loading dock. It has everything to do with it, I countered, my voice rising just a fraction. The systems I built came from that education, the routing software. The routing software works because I bought the trucks, he interrupted, slamming his hand on the desk. Because I shook the hands. Because I built this name. You think a spreadsheet runs this company? You think your little charts and graphs bring in the revenue? You are support staff. Zoe, you are a glorified admin with a checklist. Do not confuse your role with mine. The room went silent. The air conditioner hummed in the background. I looked at him. I really looked at him. I saw the fear behind the arrogance. He was afraid to admit that he did not understand how his own company worked anymore. He was afraid that if he acknowledged my value, he would have to share the credit. I am burnt out. Robert, I said softly, I cannot keep working 60 hours a week for $42,000. I am sick. I am tired. I need this to change. He picked up the binder and held it out to me, offering it back like it was a piece of trash I'd left behind. Then maybe you are not cut out for this, he said. His voice was not angry anymore. It was matter of fact. It was the voice of a man dismissing a vendor who had quoted too high. If it is too hard for you, Zoe, the door is right there. Go out into the real world. Go see what it is really like. You think it is hard here? You think your family is tough on you? Go see how a stranger treats you. You will be begging to come back in a month. I looked at the binder in his hand. I did not take it. I looked at his face. He expected me to crumble. He expected me to cry, to apologize, to say I'm sorry. Dad, I'm just stressed. Please forgive me. He expected the cycle to continue. He pushed. I folded. He took. I gave. But something strange happened in my chest. The heat vanished. The anxiety. The desperate need for his validation. The anger. It all just evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. It was the feeling of a contract being voided. He was right. I was lucky. I was lucky because he had just showed me his entire hand. He had admitted, out loud, that there was no future here. There was no promotion track. There was no partnership. There was only servitude. He did not see me as an investment. He saw me as a sunk cost he had already paid for. I stood up slowly. I smoothed the front of my skirt. I did not take the binder. I left it in his hand. Okay, I said. He blinked, surprised by the lack of fight. Okay? So we are done with this nonsense? Yes, I said. We are done. I turned and walked to the door. Get back to work. Zoe, he called after me, dropping the binder onto his desk with a heavy thud. And make sure that dispatch schedule is done by noon. I walked out of his office and closed the door gently. I walked past the reception desk where Haley's portrait hung on the wall, a professional shot paid for by the company. I walked to my small, cramped desk in the corner of the open-plan office. I sat down. I did not cry. I did not shake. I opened my email client. I opened the dispatch schedule. I started typing. My father thought the conversation was a victory. He thought he had put me back in my box. He thought he had crushed the rebellion. He was wrong. The conversation was not a negotiation. It was an exit interview. He just did not know it yet. I worked the rest of the day with terrifying efficiency. I organized the files. I cleaned up the shared drive. I made sure every pending order was updated. I was not doing it for him. I was doing it because I'm a professional. And when I leave a room, I leave it clean. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I did not need to scream. I did not need to make a scene. The market is a ruthless mechanism, as he liked to say. He told me to go test my value in the real world. He told me to see how cold it was outside. I checked the time. It was 11:30 in the morning. I minimized the dispatch schedule and opened a new browser tab. I went to the job board for the logistics industry. I typed in my credentials. There were 412 open positions in the state. I looked back at my father's closed office door. Challenge accepted. Robert, exactly 48 hours after I walked out of my father's office with my binder and my dignity barely intact, the company email system pinged. It was a priority notification sent to the entire staff roster, from the executive assistants to the forklift drivers on the loading dock. The subject line was in all capital letters: mandatory all-hands meeting, exciting announcements. I was in the middle of routing a complicated shipment of medical equipment to a convention center in Philadelphia. I stared at the screen. My stomach turned over. A slow, heavy rotation, like a cement mixer. I knew, with the instinct of an animal sensing a predator, that this meeting was about me. It was not explicitly about me. Of course, my father was too subtle for a public firing, but it was a reaction to me. It was the countermove. I walked to the main conference room. The warehouse crew was already filing in, dusting sawdust off their jeans, looking annoyed at being pulled off the line. The administrative staff sat in the front row, holding notepads. The air in the room was stale, recycled, and thick with a nervous energy. Robert stood at the head of the long oak table. He was practically vibrating. He wore his best navy suit, the one he saved for closing million-dollar deals. He looked energized, youthful, and completely in command. Beside him, standing slightly to his left, was Haley. My breath caught in my throat. Haley looked like she had just stepped out of a magazine photo shoot. She was wearing a cream-colored pantsuit that was tailored to within an inch of its life. Her hair was blown out in perfect waves. Her makeup was flawless. She was beaming, a 1,000-watt smile that managed to be both dazzling and entirely vacant. I took a seat in the back corner, near the door. I wanted to be invisible. I wanted to disappear into the drywall. Robert clapped his hands together. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming," he boomed. His voice projected to the back of the room without a microphone. "We have had a banner year at Michael Event Logistics. You all know that. We are growing. We are evolving. And in this market, if you are not evolving, you are dying." He paused for dramatic effect. He made eye contact with several of the senior drivers, nodding at them as if they were sharing a secret. "I have been doing a lot of thinking lately about the future of this family business," he continued. "I have been thinking about what we lack. We have the trucks. We have the muscle. But we need a fresh face. We need to modernize our connection with the client. We need to sell the experience, not just the service." I felt a cold prickle of sweat on the back of my neck. "That is why," he said, sweeping his arm toward my sister, "I am thrilled to announce a major strategic addition to our executive team. Please join me in welcoming the new Director of Client Experience and Brand Strategy, Haley Michael." There was a pause. Then, the polite, confused applause started. The warehouse guys clapped because they wanted to get back to work. The office staff clapped because they knew better than not to. Haley stepped forward. She gave a little wave, like royalty greeting subjects from a balcony. "Hi, everyone," she chirped. Her voice was bright and airy. "I am so excited to jump in. I really think we can elevate the vibe here. I have so many ideas about our social media presence and, the emotional journey of our customers. It is going to be amazing." Robert beamed at her like she had just explained the theory of relativity. "Haley will be reporting directly to me," Robert said. "She will be overseeing all client-facing interactions and leading our new marketing initiatives. This is the new era of Michael Event Logistics." Then came the part that made the world stop spinning. Robert looked across the room. His eyes found me in the back corner. He did not look away. He held my gaze, a small, tight smile playing on his lips. It was a look of pure, undistilled dominance. It was a look that said, "Did you think you could strong-arm me? Watch this." "Zoe," he called out. The heads of 40 employees turned to look at me. I sat up straighter. "Yes, Robert?" "Since you handle the payroll inputs," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "I have the paperwork for Haley's onboarding right here. I need you to get her set up in the system immediately. We want her on the payroll effective today." He picked up a manila folder from the table and held it up. "Come grab this, would you?" It was a power play so naked, so brutal, that I almost admired the cruelty of it. He was not just hiring her. He was making me process the transaction. He was forcing me to facilitate my own replacement. I stood up. My legs felt like wood. I walked the length of the conference room. The silence was deafening. I could hear the hum of the vending machine in the hallway. I could hear the rustle of fabric as people shifted in their seats. I reached the front of the room. I took the folder from his hand. "Make sure you get the direct deposit details right," he said, winking. "We do not want the talent to go unpaid." I looked at him. I looked at Haley, who gave me a pitying little smile. "So excited to work together." "Zoe?" she whispered. I turned and walked back to my desk. I did not look at anyone. I felt their eyes on me. They knew. Everyone in that room knew I ran the company. Everyone knew Haley had never lifted a box in her life. The injustice was hanging in the room like a toxic gas. I sat down at my computer. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from a rage so hot it felt like it was burning my skin. I opened the folder. The offer letter was on top. It was signed by Robert Michael. Position: Director of Client Experience and Brand Strategy. Starting salary: $125,000 per year. Signing bonus: $10,000. Benefits: full coverage, company car allowance, 4 weeks paid vacation. I stared at the numbers. $125,000. 2 days ago, I had begged for $85,000. I had presented a 30-page dossier of evidence proving I had saved the company twice that amount. He had told me the economy was fickle. He had told me I was lucky to have a job. He had told me I was just a glorified admin. And now, 48 hours later, he had found 3 times my salary to pay a woman whose primary qualification was that she looked good in a pantsuit and knew how to use Instagram. My salary was $42,000. Haley was making 3 times what I made. 3 times. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my throat, a hysterical, jagged thing. It was not just a rejection, it was a punishment. He was punishing me for asking. He was showing me exactly what my place was. He was saying, "We have the money. We just do not have it for you." I typed the numbers into the payroll system. I entered her name. I entered the salary. I hit the submit button. I closed the folder. I stood up and walked back to his office. The meeting had broken up. Robert was sitting at his desk, pouring a glass of scotch to celebrate. It was 11 in the morning. He looked up as I entered. He looked satisfied. "All set?" he asked. I processed it. I said, my voice was flat. I sounded like a machine. "Good," he said. $125,000. I said. It was not a question. He took a sip of his drink. "That is the market rate for executive talent." "Zoe." I asked for 85. I said, "You told me the company was broke." "I told you the company pays for value," he corrected. He set the glass down. "Look, Zoe, let me be honest with you. Since you want to talk numbers, you are a worker. You are great at working. But Haley? Haley has the attitude. She has the presence. She makes people feel good about spending money with us. You? Well, you tend to make things feel heavy. You bring the rain clouds. Haley brings the sunshine. People pay for sunshine." He leaned forward. "And frankly, Zoe, I did not appreciate your little ultimatum the other day. Walking in here with your binder, demanding things. It showed a lack of gratitude. I thought this might be a good lesson for you. You need to learn your place in the ecosystem. When you learn to smile more, maybe we can talk about a 5% bump next year." The air left the room. He admitted it. It was a lesson. He was burning $125,000 a year just to teach me to heal. I looked at him. For the first time in my life, I did not see my father. I did not see the man who taught me to ride a bike. I saw a bad CEO. I saw a liability. I understood then that there was no redeeming him. There was no winning him over. He was rot, and rot spreads. I did not scream. I did not flip the desk. I did not cry. "I see," I said. "Is that it?" he asked, looking disappointed. He wanted a fight. He wanted me to beg. He wanted to see me broken so he could magnanimously forgive me and put me back to work. "That is it," I said. I turned around and walked out. I went back to my desk. I had 4 hours left in the workday. I worked. I answered the phone calls. I updated the tracking spreadsheets. I coordinated a pickup in Delaware. I finalized the crew roster for the weekend. I did my job with absolute, terrifying perfection. My coworkers walked past me on tiptoes. They whispered near the water cooler. They expected me to storm out. They expected a scene. But I gave them nothing. I gave them the silence of a tomb. At 5 o'clock, the whistle blew in the warehouse. I saved my files. I organized my physical desktop. I placed my pens in the cup. I aligned my stapler with the edge of the desk. I put on my coat. "Good night, Zoe," the receptionist said, her voice shaking slightly. "Good night," I said. I walked out to my car. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the parking lot. I sat in the driver's seat of my 10-year-old sedan. I watched Haley walk out of the building. She was laughing, talking on her phone, unlocking her brand-new SUV that my father had likely leased for her as part of the car allowance. I drove home. I made dinner. I ate it standing over the sink. Then, I sat down at my kitchen table. I opened my personal laptop. I did not open a word processor. I opened my email client. I composed a new email. To Robert Michael, CEO. CC, Human Resources, Payroll. Subject, Resignation. Zoe Michael. I did not write a manifesto. I did not write a list of grievances. I did not mention the salary, or the insult, or the years of slavery. I did not give him the satisfaction of knowing he had hurt me. Dear Robert, please accept this letter as formal notification that I am resigning from my position as operations manager at Michael Event Logistics. My last day will be 2 weeks from today. I have organized all current project files on the shared drive. I will ensure a smooth handover of my responsibilities during the notice period. Sincerely, Zoe Michael. I read it over. It was cold. It was professional. It was a legal document. Nothing more. I hovered my mouse over the send button. For a second, panic flared. This was my whole life. This was my family. If I clicked this button, I was severing the only identity I had ever known. I was jumping off a cliff into the dark. Then I thought about the number, 125,000. I thought about, you bring the rain clouds. I clicked send. The screen refreshed. Message sent. I closed the laptop. The house was quiet, for the first time in 4 years. My phone was not buzzing, or maybe it was, and I just did not care anymore. I went to the refrigerator and poured myself a glass of white wine. I sat in the dark living room and took a sip. It tasted like freedom. They thought I would stay because I had nowhere else to go. They thought they owned me. Tomorrow, they were going to find out that the person who built the castle knows exactly where the structural weaknesses are, and they were about to find out that without the rain, nothing grows. They wanted sunshine? Fine, I would let them burn in it. I arrived at the office at 8 o'clock in the morning, exactly as I had done for the last 1,460 days. The only difference was that today, the security code to the front door felt like I was entering a stranger's house. The silence in the building was different. It was not the quiet of an empty room. It was the heavy, pressurized silence of a room where a grenade has been tossed and everyone is waiting for the pin to drop. My email had been sitting in their inboxes for 12 hours. I walked to my desk. I did not hide. I did not slouch. I turned on my computer and began the process of decoupling my life from Michael event logistics. 10 minutes later, the intercom buzzed. It was my father's assistant, a sweet woman named Patty, who looked like she had been crying. "He wants to see you," she whispered. "All of them do." I walked into the executive suite. It felt like walking into a tribunal. Robert was behind his desk, his face a mottled shade of crimson. Linda was sitting on the leather sofa, clutching a tissue, looking like she was attending a funeral. Haley was leaning against the windowsill, scrolling on her phone, looking bored but annoyed, as if my resignation was a minor scheduling conflict that was inconveniencing her yoga class. Robert did not offer me a seat. "An email?" He spat. The words came out like a physical blow. "You quit your family business over an email? That is how much respect you have for us? For me?" "It is the standard professional protocol," I said. My voice was steady. It did not shake. I was surprised by how calm I felt. It was the calm of a surgeon who knows the limb must be amputated to save the body. "Protocol," he scoffed. "Since when do we use protocol with family?" "You are my daughter, Zoe. You do not give notice. You talk to me." "I did talk to you," I reminded him. 2 days ago. You told me to leave if I did not like it. You told me to see how the real world treats me. I am taking your advice." Linda let out a sob. It was a loud, theatrical sound. "Oh, Zoe, how can you be so cruel?" she wailed. "We are building something here, a legacy, for you, for your sister, and you just want to tear it apart because of money? Because of jealousy?" I looked at my mother. For years, her tears had been the currency she used to buy my compliance. They had been the iron bars of my cage. Today, they just looked like water. "It is not jealousy." "Mom," I said gently, "it is business. I have a market value. The company declined to meet it. I am moving on." Haley looked up from her phone. She rolled her eyes so hard it looked painful. "God, you are being so dramatic," she said. She snapped her gum. "It is just a title. Zoe, Dad gave me the director job because I'm good with people. You are good with boxes. Why can you not just stay in your lane? You are acting like a child who did not get the toy she wanted." I looked at Haley. She was wearing a blazer that cost more than my first car. She had no idea that the lane she wanted me to stay in was the only thing keeping the roof from collapsing on her head. "I am not asking for the toy." "Haley," I said, "I am the one who manufactures the toys. But that is irrelevant now. My decision is final. I will work out my notice period of 14 days to ensure a smooth transition." Robert stood up. He slammed his hands on the desk. "You will fail," he said. His voice dropped to a low, menacing growl. "You think you are some hotshot executive because you have a piece of paper from a night school? You are nothing without the Michael name. You are going to go out there, and they are going to eat you alive. You have no soft skills. You have no charm. You are a grinder, Zoe, and nobody loves a grinder." I did not flinch. I let his words hang in the air. "Maybe," I said. "I guess we will find out." "You are breaking this family," Linda shouted. Standing up, "You are choosing strangers over your own blood." "I am choosing myself," I said. I turned and walked out. I heard Robert shouting behind me, something about being ungrateful, but I closed the door, cutting off the sound. The next 2 weeks were a study in surrealism. I did not slack off. I did not sabotage the servers. I did not delete files. In fact, I did the opposite. I worked with a level of forensic detail that was almost aggressive. I created a master handover document. It was 40 pages long. I documented every vendor relationship. I wrote down the personal cell phone numbers of the union stewards who only answered if they knew who was calling. I outlined the logic behind the zoning algorithms. I explained, in simple, monosyllabic words, why you cannot schedule a pickup in Manhattan at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday. I knew, with absolute certainty, that Haley would never read it, I knew Robert would toss it in a drawer, but I wrote it anyway. I wrote it so that when the collapse happened, no one could say I left them without a map. I was leaving them the map. I just knew they did not know how to drive. The atmosphere in the office disintegrated. Haley began her reign immediately. She ordered new furniture for her office. She called a meeting with the creative team to redesign the logo, ignoring the fact that we had 3 trucks down for maintenance. She walked through the warehouse in high heels, pointing at things and asking if we could organize them by color, instead of by weight and frequency of use. I watched her do it. I did not intervene. I did not correct her. I was no longer the fixer. I was just the observer. The staff, however, sensed the shift. 3 days before my last day, Miller, the warehouse foreman, cornered me near the loading bay. Miller was a man of few words. He had forearms like tree trunks and a face carved out of granite. He had been with the company since I was in diapers. He looked around to make sure no one was listening. "Is it true?" he asked. "You are really punching out?" I nodded. "Friday is my last day." Miller. He took off his baseball cap and ran a hand through his thinning hair. He looked tired. He looked at the chaos starting to pile up near Bay 4, where Haley had ordered a staging area for a photo shoot that blocked the main forklift route. "Where are you going?" he asked. "I cannot say yet," I said. He nodded. He understood. He looked at me with a mixture of sadness and respect. "You know this place runs on your back, Zoe," he said. "The old man. He thinks he drives the truck, but you are the transmission. Without the transmission, the engine just makes noise." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thank you, Miller." "Take me with you," he said. It was not a joke. He was dead serious. I looked at him. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell him to pack his toolbox. But I couldn't. Not yet. I had to do this cleanly. If I stole staff now, Robert would sue me for solicitation. He would paint me as the villain who tried to destroy the company from the inside. "I have to go alone. Miller," I said softly. "For now. But keep your phone on." He grinned. A quick, sharp expression, loud and clear. "Boss." He called me boss. Not Robert, not Haley, me. That single word meant more to me than the entire director title Haley was currently printing on her business cards. The final Friday arrived with a gray, drizzling rain. It felt appropriate. I packed a single cardboard box. I had been there for 4 years, but I had very little to show for it. A framed photo of my dog, a stress ball, a coffee mug that said, "Logistics, the art of war." There was no farewell party. There was no cake in the break room. My mother had not spoken to me in 12 days. My father was out on a site visit, which I knew meant he was hiding at the country club because he could not bear to watch me walk out the door. Haley was in her office. I could hear her laughing on the phone, probably planning a launch party for the new brand identity. I placed my keys on my desk. I placed the 40-page handover document right next to them. I placed my company credit card on top of the document. I put on my coat. I picked up my box. I walked through the open plan office. The phones were ringing. People were typing. The machine was still humming, powered by the momentum I had built. They did not know yet that the battery had been removed. Patty, the assistant, looked up as I passed. She had tears in her eyes again. "Good luck, Zoe," she whispered. "Take care of yourself, Patty," I said. I walked out the front door. The cool, damp air hit my face. I walked to my car, put the box in the passenger seat, and sat behind the wheel. I looked back at the building one last time. I saw the sign, Michael Event Logistics. My father had said I would fail. He had said I was nothing without that name. I started my car. The engine purred. I did not feel like a failure. I felt like a diver who had been holding her breath for 4 years and had finally broken the surface. I took a deep lungful of air. I put the car in drive and pulled out of the lot. I did not look in the rearview mirror. I did not speed. I drove strictly the speed limit, merging onto the highway with perfect precision. I was unemployed. I was estranged from my family. I was alone. But as I drove toward the city, My phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again. I smiled. I knew who it was. It wasn't my family. It was the market. And unlike my father, the market knew exactly what I was worth. For the first time in my adult life, I sat down to write a document that did not have the Michael Event Logistics logo at the top. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and a blank word processor page. My father had told me that without the family name, I was nothing. He had told me that the industry was a small club and that I was just the help. I looked at the blinking cursor. I decided to test that theory. I did not write a resume that listed my duties. I wrote a resume that listed my wars. I did not write managed inventory. I wrote designed and coded a proprietary digital tracking system that reduced asset loss by 92% over 36 months. I did not write oversaw drivers. I wrote restructured tri-state dispatching protocols, increasing fleet efficiency by 15% and reducing overtime costs by $60,000 annually. I stripped every ounce of emotion out of the text. I removed the word family. I removed the soft language of support and assistance. I presented myself not as a person, but as a high-performance engine that could be dropped into any chassis and immediately produce torque. I posted the CV on 3 major industry portals on a Monday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, I had 4 voicemails. By Wednesday, I had 3 interviews scheduled. My father had predicted I would be eaten alive. He was right, in a way, but he was wrong about who was doing the eating. The market was starving for competence, and I was a steak dinner. The first 2 interviews were with mid-sized regional carriers. They were standard. The hiring managers asked me technical questions about compliance software and Department of Transportation regulations. They did not ask me if I could smile more. They did not ask me if I could bring the sunshine. They asked me how I handled a driver who was over his hours in a blizzard. When I gave them the answer, citing the specific subsection of the federal code and the exact protocol for emergency substitution, they took notes. They looked at me with respect. It was disorienting. I was so used to being interrupted, to being told my tone was too harsh, that to be listened to felt like a magic trick. But the real turning point came on Friday morning. I received an email from an executive recruiter named David. The subject line was simply, Northway Logistics Group, Regional Leadership. Northway Logistics Group. If Michael Event Logistics was a speedboat, Northway was an aircraft carrier. They were a national giant. They handled supply chains for Fortune 500 companies. They moved pharmaceuticals, aerospace components, and hazardous materials. They were the gold standard. I called the number in the email. David answered on the first ring. Zoe, he said. His voice was brisk and professional. Thank you for calling. I have been hoping to see your name pop up on the wire for about 18 months. I paused. You have? We watched the regional players. Zoe, he said, we track efficiency metrics. We noticed something interesting happening at Michael Event Logistics about 4 years ago. Their on-time delivery rates spiked. Their safety compliance went through the roof. But whenever we saw Robert Michael at the trade shows, he was Robert. We knew he was not the one doing the math. We figured there was an operator in the shadows. We just did not know it was his daughter until you posted your resume. I felt a chill run down my spine. It was the chill of validation. While I was sitting in the dark back office, thinking I was invisible, the giants had been watching the data. My father thought he was the face of the company, but Northway had been looking at the numbers, and the numbers were me. Can you come to the regional headquarters on Monday? David asked. We have a role we have been struggling to fill because we cannot find anyone who understands both the warehouse grit and the boardroom strategy. I put on my best charcoal suit on Monday morning. I drove to the Northway campus. It was a massive glass and steel structure that looked more like a tech company than a trucking firm. I met with the vice president of operations, a woman named Elias. She was 50 years old, wore no makeup, and had a handshake that could crush a walnut. There was no small talk. There were no questions about my hobbies. She put a schematic on the table. This is a distribution hub we are opening in the Midwest, she said. It is currently running at 60% efficiency. We are bleeding money on the cross-docking. Tell me how you would fix it." I looked at the schematic. I saw the choke points immediately. The loading bays were synchronized wrong. The intake was fighting the output. I pulled a pen from my pocket. "Can I write on this?" "Be my guest," she said. For the next hour, I dissected the hub. I redrew the traffic flow. I reorganized the shift patterns. I spoke for 40 minutes straight, fueled by adrenaline and 4 years of suppressed expertise. I forgot I was in an interview. I was just solving the puzzle. When I finished, the schematic was covered in red ink. I looked up, suddenly realizing I might have been too aggressive. Elias was staring at the paper. She traced a line I had drawn with her finger. "You moved the quality control checkpoint to the intake instead of the outtake," she observed. "It saves you from processing damaged goods," I said. "If you catch it at the door, you do not waste labor moving it across the floor." Elias looked at me. She smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was a predatory smile. It was the smile of a general finding a new sniper. "Why did you stay there so long?" she asked. "At your father's place?" I hesitated. I could have lied. I could have given a corporate answer about loyalty. "I thought if I worked hard enough, they would eventually see me," I said honestly. Elias nodded. "A common mistake. Competence is a threat to incompetent people. You were never going to be promoted. Zoe, you were making them look bad by existing." She closed the folder. "I do not need to talk to anyone else," she said. 2 hours later, I was sitting in HR with a printed offer letter in front of me. I read the document. I had to read it 3 times to make sure my eyes were not hallucinating. Position: Regional Operations Director. Base salary: $155,000. Performance bonus: up to 20% annually. Stock options: vesting over 4 years. Sign-on bonus: $15,000. $155,000. It was nearly 4 times what I was making at Michael Event Logistics. It was $30,000 more than Haley was being paid to ruin the company. I looked at the HR director. "Is this correct?" The director looked confused. "Is it too low? We can discuss a slight adjustment if you have competing offers. But this is the top of the band for this grade." "No," I said quickly. "The number is fine." It was not just the money. It was the scope. The offer detailed my authority. I would have full hiring and firing power. I would have budget autonomy. I would report directly to Elias. There was no glass ceiling. There was no family discount. I signed the paper. The ink looked black and permanent. As I was walking out, Elias caught me in the lobby. "One more thing. Zoe," she said. She lowered her voice. "We know the industry is tight. We know your father's company has some legacy staff, good people who are probably being misused." I looked at her. "I cannot solicit them," I said firmly. "I signed a non-compete clause regarding active poaching. I will not violate my contract." Elias nodded approvingly. "I know, and I respect that integrity. That is why we hired you. But Northway is always accepting applications. If people were to reach out to us on their own accord, and if those people happen to have been trained by you, well, we would certainly look at those applications very favorably." I thought of Miller. I thought of the dispatch team I had trained. "I understand," I said. I walked out of the Northway building and into the parking lot. The sun was shining. It was a bright, harsh light, but for the first time in years, it did not feel like it was burning me. I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel. I waited for the guilt to hit. I waited for the voice of my mother to scream in my head that I was a traitor. I waited for the fear that my father was right, that I was an imposter. But the feelings did not come. Instead, a physical sensation washed over me. It started in my shoulders and moved down my spine. It was the feeling of a heavy, suffocating weight being lifted off my chest. It was the feeling of oxygen rushing into lungs that had been starved for air. I was safe. I was not just employed, I was valued. The market had looked at me, stripped of my last name, stripped of my history, and it had stamped a price tag on my forehead that said, "Premium." My phone buzzed. It was a text from Miller. Place is a zoo. New girl ordered the wrong pallets. Drivers are threatening to walk. Hope you are good. I looked at the offer letter on the passenger seat. I typed back. I am better than good. Miller, I am free. And by the way, I hear Northway has a very easy online application portal. I put the phone down. I started the car. I drove to a steakhouse. I sat at the bar alone. I ordered a glass of the most expensive red wine on the menu and a medium rare filet. When the food came, I toasted myself in the mirror behind the bar. To Zoe, I whispered. I took a bite. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. I did not know what was happening back at the warehouse. I did not know if Haley was crying in the bathroom or if my father was screaming at the walls. And for the first time in 29 years, I realized that it was not my problem to solve. I had built them a machine that printed money, and they had thrown me out. Now, they were stuck with the keys to a vehicle they did not know how to drive, while I was stepping onto a rocket ship. I finished my meal, paid the check with my own money, and walked out into the cool evening air. The city lights were twinkling. The world was big and loud and full of opportunity. I was ready to work, but this time, I was working for me. I watched the collapse from a glass office 20 miles away. It did not happen all at once like a controlled demolition. It happened like a slow-motion car crash, where you can see the tires losing grip long before the vehicle hits the wall. I had been at Northway Logistics Group for 3 months. I was busy fixing the Midwest hub, reducing wait times by 14%, and earning the respect of a team that actually listened when I spoke. But the logistics industry is a small village disguised as a global network. Drivers talk at truck stops, warehouse managers text each other, and the gossip coming out of Michael Event Logistics was not just bad, it was catastrophic. It started with the rebranding. Haley decided that the company's problem was not its aging fleet or its thin margins, but its aesthetic. She convinced my father that the trucks looked too aggressive. She spent $40,000 wrapping the entire fleet in a soft, matte beige vinyl with the new slogan, "Delivering Vibe, Not Just Cargo." The problem was that the vinyl wrap covered the inspection panels on the older trucks. The mechanics could not easily check for rust or stress fractures on the chassis without peeling back the expensive sticker. So, they stopped checking. Then came the budget cuts. To pay for the rebranding and her new marketing team, which consisted of 2 of her sorority sisters who were hired as social media architects, Haley slashed the operational maintenance budget by 30%. She argued that since I had updated the fleet recently, the trucks practically ran themselves. She did not understand that a logistics system is a living thing. It eats money to stay alive. You stop feeding it, and it dies. The first cracks appeared in the schedule. I had built a custom digital calendar that cross-referenced equipment availability with driver hours. It was ugly, color-coded in neon green and red, but it was foolproof. It flagged conflicts instantly. Haley deleted it. She told the office manager it was visually overwhelming and gave her anxiety. She replaced it with a sleek, cloud-based project management board that looked beautiful but had no back-end logic. It did not know that you cannot book the same audio mixing board for a concert in Brooklyn and a wedding in Montauk on the same night. It just looked pretty on an iPad. The double book happened 6 weeks after I left. It was the height of the wedding season. Michael Event Logistics had 2 major contracts for the same Saturday. One was the Goldenberg wedding, a high society affair at the Botanical Gardens. The other was a corporate launch for a tech startup in the city. Both clients had paid a premium for the Gold package, which included our exclusive, high-end white leather lounge furniture. We only owned 1 set of white leather lounge furniture. In my system, the second booking would have triggered a giant red warning box that said, "Insufficient inventory." In Haley's system, it just made a satisfying ding sound and added a pastel-colored card to the to-do column. Saturday arrived. The trucks were loaded. The crew for the wedding arrived at the warehouse at 6 in the morning. They loaded the white furniture. They drove away. The crew for the tech launch arrived at 8. They went to the bay where the furniture was supposed to be. It was empty. Miller, the foreman, called the office. No answer. It was Saturday. Haley did not work weekends. Robert was at the club. Miller made an executive decision. He loaded the old, scratched black leather furniture we kept for backup. He hoped the client would not notice. The client noticed. The tech CEO screamed at the driver. He pulled up the contract on his phone, which clearly stated, "Premium white leather collection." He refused to sign the delivery manifest. He sent the truck away. Robert received the angry phone call on the 9th hole. He tried to do what he always did, charm his way out of it. He told the CEO it was a vintage aesthetic choice. The CEO told him to read the contract and threatened to sue for breach of service. But that was just a skirmish. The war was lost a month later at the Apex Medical Summit. This was the company's whale. It was a 3-day conference for 3,000 doctors. It accounted for 15% of the annual revenue. I had managed this event for 4 years. I started planning it 6 months in advance. I knew the loading dock at the convention center had a clearance height of 12 feet, 6 inches. Our standard trailers were 13 feet. I always rented a specialized lowboy fleet for this specific job. I had left the instructions in my handover document. Page 12, bold text, rent lowboy trailers for Apex Summit. Haley did not read the document. Robert did not check the rental logs. On the morning of the load-in, Michael Event Logistics sent 10 standard 13-foot trailers to the convention center. They arrived at the loading dock at 5 in the morning. The first truck backed in. The top of the trailer slammed into the concrete overhang of the convention center, with a sound like a bomb going off. The roof of the trailer was peeled back like a sardine can. The sprinkler system in the loading dock was sheared off. Water poured down on $50,000 worth of high-end audio equipment inside the open truck. The entire loading dock was shut down by the fire marshal. The trucks could not unload. The equipment was soaked. The schedule for the conference was blown to pieces. I heard about it because my phone started blowing up at Northway. Not from my family, but from the vendors, the lighting guy, the caterer, the union rep. They were all texting me. "Did you see this? It is a bloodbath." Robert arrived at the scene an hour later. He was not wearing a safety vest. He was wearing a suit. He stood in the middle of a flooded loading dock, screaming at the drivers. "Why did you drive it in there?" he yelled. "Because the manifest said go to Dock B," the driver yelled back. "I drive the truck you give me. Robert." Robert turned to Miller. "Fix this. Get the gear inside." "We cannot," Miller shouted. "The fire marshal shut us down. And even if we could, the amps are swimming." Robert pulled out his phone. He looked at it helplessly. He did not know who to call. He did not know the number for the emergency equipment rental house because I was the one who kept that relationship. He did not know the name of the fire marshal because I was the one who filed the permits. He was the CEO of a company he did not understand. The Apex Medical Summit was canceled. The client did not just refuse to pay. They activated the penalty clause for gross negligence. They demanded a refund of the deposit plus damages for the canceled conference. It was a lawsuit that would reach into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. That evening, the exodus began. Miller quit on the spot. He did not give 2 weeks' notice. He simply handed Robert his keys and walked away from the flooded dock. The next morning, 3 of the best lead drivers resigned. They knew that if the company lost the Apex contract, layoffs were coming. They jumped ship before the water got too high. Haley tried to spin it. She posted a photo on Instagram of the team, working hard through challenges, with a caption about resilience. The comments section was flooded with angry vendors asking when their invoices would be paid. 2 days after the Apex disaster, I was sitting in my office at Northway when my receptionist buzzed me. "There is a Mr. Miller here to see you," she said. "He says he does not have an appointment, but you told him to come." "Send him in," I said. Miller walked in. He looked 10 years older than the last time I saw him. He was holding a crumpled baseball cap. "I heard about the dock," I said. He nodded grimly. "It is over. Zoe, the insurance company, is investigating. They might not pay out because the vehicle height warning was clearly posted and the driver ignored it. But the driver ignored it because the route sheet Haley printed out said the clearance was 14 feet. She Googled the wrong building. I closed my eyes. It was such a stupid, preventable error. Robert is losing his mind, Miller continued. He is firing people at random. He fired the dispatcher because it rained. He fired the mechanic because the truck roof ripped, as if the metal should have been stronger than concrete. I pushed a folder across my desk. It was an application form for Northway. I cannot hire everyone. Miller, I said, but I need a warehouse manager for the new hub. The pay is 40% higher than what you were making. The benefits start day one. And I promise you, if I tell you a loading dock is 12 feet, it is 12 feet. Miller took the pen. He signed the paper without reading it. I missed having a captain who can read a map, he said. By the end of the week, I had hired 3 more of my old crew. I did not call them. They called me. They showed up in the lobby of Northway looking like refugees. I hired the best dispatcher. I hired the lead rigger. I hired the safety compliance officer. Northway was getting the cream of the crop, a fully trained, cohesive team that had worked together for a decade, for the price of standard market salaries. My boss, Elias, was ecstatic. She called it the Michael acquisition without having to buy the company. Meanwhile, Michael Event Logistics was free-falling. I received an email from a friend who still worked in accounting there. She told me that Robert had called an emergency meeting. He had screamed for an hour. He blamed the drivers. He blamed the weather. He blamed the disloyal staff who left. He never blamed the system. He never blamed Haley. Haley, for her part, had stopped coming to the office. She claimed the stress was affecting her mental health. She was working from home, which mostly involved posting vague, inspirational quotes about how haters want to see you fail. The final domino fell on a Thursday. Northway received a request for proposal, an RFP, from a massive client. It was the pharmaceutical chain I had won over years ago, the one where Robert had taken credit for my redundancy answer. Their contract with Michael Event Logistics was up for renewal. Usually, these renewals are automatic. You do not change logistics partners if things are working. They sent the RFP to us. I read the cover letter. We are seeking a new partner due to significant service degradation and reliability concerns with our current vendor. They were firing my father. I held the document in my hand. This was it. This was the revenue stream that paid for the mortgage on my parents' house. This was the money that paid for Haley's leased SUV. If I won this contract, I would not just be beating them, I would be unplugging their life support. I walked into Elias's office. I put the RFP on her desk. I know this client, I said. I know exactly what they need. I know their shipping lanes better than they do. Elias looked at me. She knew who the current vendor was. Do you want this one, Zoe? She asked. Or is it too close to home? I looked at the window. I thought about the flooded loading dock. I thought about Miller's tired face. I thought about the director of client experience making 3 times my salary to destroy everything I built. It is business, Elias, I said, and we are the better option. Write the proposal, she said. I wrote it. I priced it aggressively. I used the very data I had generated years ago to show them how we could improve their efficiency even further. We won the contract 4 days later. When the news broke, the silence from my family was deafening. There were no angry texts, no screaming voicemails. That is when I knew. They were not angry anymore. They were drowning. And for the first time, they realized that the person on the shore holding the life preserver was the one they had pushed off the boat. The call came on a Tuesday night, 3 weeks after I secured the pharmaceutical contract for Northway. My phone displayed the caller ID. Dad. It was the first time he had called me directly since the day I handed him the payroll folder for Haley. I stared at the screen for a long moment. I was sitting on my balcony, a glass of wine in hand, reviewing the quarterly projections for my new regional hub. The numbers were beautiful. They were green. They were growing. I answered on the 4th ring. Hello? Robert, I said. There was a pause. The silence on the other end was heavy, filled with the static of reluctant necessity. Zoe, he said. His voice sounded thinner than I remembered. Less booming, less sure. Your mother. She has been asking about you. She made a pot roast. She wants to know if you can come over for dinner tomorrow, to catch up. I knew exactly what this was, in the Michael family dictionary. Catch up was code for, we need something. I am not coming for dinner. Robert, I said calmly, I have a late meeting. Zoe, please, he said, and the desperation leaked through the cracks in his voice. We need to talk, about business. Just come over, please. I agreed to go, not out of obedience, but out of curiosity. I wanted to see the wreckage up close. I wanted to verify that my assessment of the damage was correct. I arrived at my parents' house at 7 o'clock. The lawn, usually manicured to perfection, looked a little overgrown. The lights in the house were dim. I walked into the dining room. The table was set for 3. Haley was not there. Where is Haley? I asked, taking my seat. She is not feeling well, Linda said quickly. She poured me a glass of water. Her hand was shaking. She is taking a mental health day. She is upstairs resting. Resting from what? I wondered. Resting from driving the company into a ditch? Robert sat at the head of the table. He looked gray. The confidence that usually radiated from him like heat was gone, replaced by a nervous, twitchy energy. He pushed a piece of roast beef around his plate. So, he started, clearing his throat, we hear you are doing well at Northway. I am, I said, I am the regional director now. That is good, he said. He took a sip of wine. Look, Zoe, let's cut the small talk. We are in a bit of a tight spot. The Apex lawsuit. It is getting complicated, and losing the pharma contract, that was a blow. You did not lose it, I corrected him gently. You forfeited it. Your performance metrics dropped below the acceptable threshold. The client moved to a vendor who could guarantee delivery. That is how the market works. Robert flinched. He put his fork down. We need to stabilize, he said. We have some staffing issues. Miller left. The dispatch team is gone. We have new guys, but they do not know the system. They do not know the routes. They do not know the system because I built the system in my head and took the map with me. I thought, we want you to come back, Linda said suddenly. She reached across the table and touched my hand. Her eyes were wet. We want you to come home. Zoe, we miss you. The company misses you. It is just not the same without you. Robert nodded. He tried to summon his old authority. I am willing to let bygones be bygones. Zoe, I am willing to offer you your old job back. We can even discuss a raise. Maybe $45,000? And I will tell Haley to give you more space in the warehouse. I looked at them. I looked at this offer that was wrapped in arrogance and delusion. He was offering me a return to slavery for a $3,000 raise, while the ship was sinking. I laughed. I could not help it. It was a short, dry sound. My old job? I asked. Robert, I make $155,000 a year now. I manage a team of 200 people. I have equity in a billion-dollar company. Why would I come back to manage a warehouse for $45,000? Robert's face reddened. Because this is yours, he snapped. This is your legacy. Someday, this will all be yours. At this rate, the only thing that will be mine is the debt, I said. I reached into my bag. I had not come for dinner. I had come for business. I pulled out a document I had drafted with my lawyer the night before. I slid it across the table. I am not coming back as an employee. Robert, that ship has sailed. I am not your daughter in this room. I am an independent contractor. He looked at the paper. What is this? It is a consulting agreement, I said. I leaned forward, clasping my hands on the table. If you want me to save the company, and I can save it, I will do it on my terms. I will come on board as an external crisis management consultant. I will work 20 hours a week, remotely and on-site as needed. Robert picked up the paper. He squinted at the numbers. His eyes bulged. $250 an hour? He shouted. He threw the paper down. Are you out of your mind? You are trying to extort your own father? That is the standard market rate for a consultant with my level of expertise, I said calmly. Actually, it is a discount. My firm charges clients $350. And look at Clause 4. I added, pointing to the paragraph. Full operational authority. That means I have the power to override any decision made by the current executive team. That means if I say a truck does not move, it does not move. If I say we fire the marketing team to save cash, we fire them. You mean you want to fire Haley? He said, his voice shaking with rage. I mean, I want to stop the bleeding. I said, if Haley is the wound, then yes. He stood up. He was trembling. We are family, he yelled. Family does not charge family $250 an hour. Family helps each other. You ungrateful little. I paid for your braces. I put a roof over your head. And I gave you 10 years of underpaid labor that built the roof you are standing under right now. I countered. My voice remained low, which only made him angrier. I subsidized this family with my sweat equity for a decade. That was my contribution. I am done donating. If you want my skill, you buy it. Linda started crying. It was the same sound from the day I quit. Zoe, please, she sobbed. Why do you have to be so cold? We are your parents. We are drowning here. Can you not just help us? Just for a few months? Until we get back on our feet? Mom, I said, looking at her, I am offering to help. I am offering to fix the entire mess. I am just asking to be paid for it. Why is my value the only thing in this family that is always negotiable? Why is Haley's salary essential, but my salary is a favor? She is your sister, Linda wailed. She is fragile. She is incompetent, I said, and she is expensive. Robert leaned over the table. His face was inches from mine. I will not sign this, he hissed. I will not let you walk in here and humiliate me in my own house. I will not let you dictate terms to me. I built this company from nothing. And you are currently turning it back into nothing, I said. I stood up. I picked up the contract. This offer expires in 24 hours. I said, if you change your mind, you can email my attorney. You walk out that door, and you are dead to me, Robert said. It was a threat he had used 1,000 times before. It used to terrify me. It used to make me beg for forgiveness. Now, it just sounded like a man shouting at the weather. You already said that when I quit. Robert, I reminded him, it did not stick then, and it does not matter now. I walked to the door. Zoe, my mother called out. She stood up, knocking her chair over. She ran to me and grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, desperate. Don't do this, she pleaded. If the company goes under, we lose the house. We lose everything. Your father, he won't survive it. He is too old to start over. Please, just do it for us. Be the bigger person. You were always the bigger person. I looked down at her hand on my arm. I felt a pang of pity. She was terrified. She was watching her comfortable, illusion-filled life crumble. And she wanted me to step back in and hold up the walls like I always did. She wanted me to carry the weight so she didn't have to feel the crush. But I remembered the pain in my stomach. I remembered the panic attacks. I remembered the graduation day when my father checked his watch. I gently removed her hand from my arm. Tell Dad to sign the paper, I said, or tell him to learn how to drive a forklift. I walked out into the night. I got into my car. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of holding a boundary I should have set years ago. I drove away. I did not look back at the house. I knew what was happening inside. Robert was pouring a drink. Linda was crying. Haley was probably upstairs, hiding under the covers, waiting for someone else to fix the world. But the world had changed. The fixer had retired. And for the first time, they were going to have to pay the bill. The end did not come with a bang. It came with the quiet, suffocating rustle of legal paper in a conference room on the 42nd floor of a skyscraper in downtown Manhattan. 3 months after I walked out of my parents' house, Michael Event Logistics was clinically dead. The Apex lawsuit had drained the cash reserves. The loss of the pharmaceutical contract had severed the artery of reliable cash flow. The bank had called in the business line of credit. My father, who had spent 40 years believing he was the master of the universe, was now just a man with a lot of debt and a warehouse full of trucks he could not afford to fuel. He had no choice but to sell. He had spent weeks looking for a buyer who would preserve the Michael legacy. He wanted a white knight who would let him keep his title and let Haley keep playing executive. But the market does not care about legacies. It cares about assets and liabilities. And right now, the Michael brand was toxic. There was only one serious offer. It came from a holding company called Vector Global. Robert, Linda, and their lawyers sat on one side of the massive glass table. I was not there when the meeting started. I was waiting in the adjoining room. The lead negotiator for Vector was a man named Mr. Sterling. He was cold, precise, and entirely uninterested in my father's stories about the good old days. "We have reviewed the financials." "Robert," Sterling said. His voice was amplified by the conference room acoustics. "To be frank, the company is insolvent. The only reason we are entertaining an acquisition at all is because of the infrastructure, the zoning licenses, the grandfathered routes, and the data architecture." Robert straightened his tie. "Exactly," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "We have a world-class system." "Actually," Sterling corrected him, "you had a world-class system. Our due diligence shows that the system has been systematically dismantled over the last quarter. However, we believe it can be salvaged. But we are not buying the management. We are buying the mechanism." Sterling tapped a folder on the table. "To facilitate this transition, we have brought in our own operational consultant to verify the assets. This person knows your infrastructure better than anyone. They will be the final signatory on the asset valuation." Sterling pressed a button on the intercom. "Send her in." The double doors opened. I walked in. I was not wearing my old warehouse fleece. I was wearing a tailored black suit. I carried a leather portfolio with the Northway Logistics Group logo embossed on the side. The silence in the room was absolute. It sucked the air out of the lungs of everyone present. Robert went pale. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Linda gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Haley, who had been allowed to attend in a last-ditch effort to prove her relevance, dropped her pen. "You," Robert whispered. "Hello?" "Robert," I said. I took the empty seat next to Mr. Sterling. "You are working for them?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Zoe is not an employee of Vector," Sterling interjected smoothly. "Vector is a strategic partner of Northway Logistics. When we saw this asset came on the market, we consulted with Northway. They informed us that their regional director, Ms. Michael, was the original architect of your entire operation. We retained her to oversee the valuation. Her word is final." I opened my portfolio. I did not look at my mother's tears. I did not look at Haley's shock. I looked at the numbers. "I have reviewed the current state of the fleet," I said. My voice was calm, professional, and detached. It was the voice of the market. Since my departure, fleet maintenance compliance has dropped to 60%. The digital routing system has been deleted. The vendor relationships are in tatters. I turned a page. However, the core logic I built is still recoverable from the backup servers. The zoning permits I filed 5 years ago are still valid. That is where the value lies. I slid a single sheet of paper across the table toward my father. "This is the valuation report," I said. Robert looked down. $1,200,000, he read. His face turned red. "This is an insult. The real estate alone is worth that." "The real estate is leveraged to the hilt," I reminded him. "You mortgaged the warehouse to pay for the settlement on the Apex lawsuit. This number is for the business operations. And frankly, Robert, it is generous. It is exactly enough to pay off the bank, settle the outstanding vendor invoices, and leave you with a very small retirement cushion." "It is nothing," he shouted. He looked at Sterling. "This is personal. She is doing this to punish me. She is trying to steal my company." "Mr. Sterling looked bored. "Mr. Michael, if it were not for Zoe's assessment that the data is salvageable, our offer would be 0. We would just wait for the bank to foreclose and buy the trucks at auction. She is the only reason there is a number on that page at all." Robert looked at me. His eyes were wide, searching for the daughter who used to fetch him coffee. The daughter who used to apologize for his mistakes. She was not there. "Why?" he whispered. Because it is the truth. Robert, I said, the market does not lie. You told me that yourself. You said I was worth nothing without your name. It turns out, your name was worth nothing without my work. I turned to Sterling. There is one condition to my approval of this valuation. I said. Sterling nodded. Name it. Clause 17. I said, I want a guaranteed retention fund for the warehouse staff and drivers. Specifically, the employees listed in Appendix B. Their jobs must be preserved for a minimum of 24 months, with their seniority recognized. If Vector restructures, they must be offered severance packages equal to 6 months of salary. Robert looked confused. You are protecting the drivers? I am protecting the people who actually built this company. I said. And what about Haley? Linda asked. Her voice was small and terrified. Clause 17 covers Haley, right? She is an employee. I looked at Haley. She was staring at the table, her face burning with humiliation. The retention clause applies to operational staff essential to the business function. I said, the position of Director of Client Experience is redundant. Vector already has a marketing department. Haley looked up at me. Her eyes were filled with tears, but they were angry tears. You are firing me, she hissed. I am not firing you. Haley, I said gently, I am simply not buying what you are selling. There is a difference. I looked back at Robert. Sign the papers. Robert, I said, it is the only way out. If you do not sign, the bank takes the house by Friday. The room was silent for a long time. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. Robert Michael looked at the pen in front of him. He looked at the empire he thought he built. He looked at the daughter he had thrown away, who was now the only thing standing between him and total ruin. He picked up the pen. His hand shook. He signed. With that scrawl of ink, Michael Event Logistics ceased to be a family legacy. It became a line item in a conglomerate's portfolio. Sterling gathered the papers. Excellent. We will wire the funds to the escrow account within 48 hours. The meeting broke up. Sterling shook my hand. Good work, Zoe, as always. He left the room. I stood up to pack my portfolio. My family remained seated, looking like statues in a graveyard. Zoe, my mother said. Her voice was a whisper. Are you happy now? You won. You beat us. I stopped. I looked at them one last time. I saw an old man who had believed his own hype. I saw a mother who had enabled him. I saw a sister who had never been told no. I did not feel happy. Happiness is a warm emotion. What I felt was lighter than that. I felt clean. I felt balanced. The ledger was finally closed. I did not beat you. Mom, I said, I just stopped letting you beat me. I walked to the door. Zoe, my father called out. I paused, my hand on the handle. He looked at me. For a second, I thought he might apologize. I thought he might say he was proud of me, or that he was sorry he had missed my graduation, or that he should have paid me what I was worth. You were right, he said, his voice raspy, about the trucks, the lowboy trailers. You were right. It was the closest he would ever get to an apology. He was admitting a technical error to avoid admitting a moral one. I know, I said. I opened the door and walked out. I walked through the lobby of the skyscraper. I stepped out onto the busy Manhattan sidewalk. The sun was setting, painting the city in shades of gold and fire. The noise of the traffic was loud, chaotic, and beautiful. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Elias at Northway. Deal closed? I typed back. Closed. The team is safe. I put the phone in my pocket. I took a deep breath of the city air. I was 29 years old. I had a career that was soaring. I had a team that respected me, and I was entirely, completely free. I started walking toward the subway. I did not look back at the building. I did not look back at the past. The rearview mirror is for checking what is behind you, but you cannot drive the truck if you do not look at the road ahead. And the road ahead was wide open. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please drop your city or country in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed this story of justice served, please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this video get recommended to more people who need to hear it. See you in the next story.